Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donahue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donahue, and my cohort in creepitude, as always, is the amazing Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. We are recording this time. Yay! We are the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. We have kind of a literary creep to talk about today, but it's also got a little bit of pop culture in there. I'm excited to talk to y'all and get into this story. There's a lot going on here. Just wanted to let you know that if you want to give us ideas for creeps and for non-creeps, just so you know, we always end the show with someone who's a non-creep, so you don't leave feeling like the world is a total waste of time. That's how we want you to feel a little bit better about the world than when you entered in this podcast, okay? Even when we're talking about creeps. If you want to reach out to us, we do have a basic Facebook page, but that's where people usually go to complain about our language. Yes, we use salty language in this program, so if you're in a van full of kids and you don't want them to hear F-bombs and whatever, now would be a good time to hit the pause and listen to us later.
Hit pause because fucking deal with it.
If you want to interact with us, and we're mostly interactive in our Facebook group, What a Creep podcast group, you have to ask to join. It is a private group, and we're trying to keep it nice and friendly in there. So you just need to answer a few questions. But we talk about creeps, and we talk about pop culture and things going on in the news, that kind of stuff. You can find us on Twitter at CreepPod. Well, Twitter still exists. But we're at CreepPod because somebody had What a Creep on Twitter for over 10 years and never used it. Probably Elon.
Creep.
We're on Instagram, What a Creep Podcast. We're on Threads, What a Creep Podcast. And we have an old-timey email, What a Creep Podcast, spelled it all out, at gmail.com. And if you would like some stickers, just send us your address, and we will drop them in the mail for you wherever you are on the planet of Earth.
She'll do it.
Dare me, y'all. I go crazy sometimes.
She does.
I do.
You'll get all kinds of stickers.
Oh, you will. You will. You'll be busted with stickers there, I'll tell you, in your envelope. Sonia, do you want to tell them about the website?
Yes, go to whatacreeppodcast.com, and it's everything you wanted to know about our podcast, but we're afraid to ask. There are links to all of our past episodes, and in each of those little posts are show notes, because we source every single thing we do. We're not making this shit up, and we want to give credit to the people that did all the dirty work. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I'd like to learn even more, that's a great place to start. You can dig a little deeper. So please do that. We also have a link to our merch shop where you could get t-shirts and tote bags and face masks and all the things. I just uploaded some new designs last week, including adorable, everybody drink, and the high road can get fucked, which... It's true. It can. My shirt arrived the other day. It's super comfy and soft. I love that shirt. But the F word, it's all like blurred out or whatever. So you could technically wear it.
You could wear it with your van full of children and get away with it, mostly.
There's also a link to our Substack where once a month we have like a newsletter that comes out, and we talk about creeps, some updates on people we've covered. And we also include a lot of our recs called the Rec Room, which is like movies and books and all kinds of good stuff. So please sign up. And there's more.
But wait, there's more.
There's more. There's you could go to our Patreon page. You want to tell them about that, Margot?
Yes, Patreon. We've been doing this show for several years now. This is season 21 we're on.
What?
On the Patreon wall, we have seasons 1 through 8. Yes, Woody Allen and Roman Polanski are in there.
Yes.
Just like they're in the Venice Film Festival, they're on our Patreon wall if y'all want to listen. We have a couple of very affordable options. We put out 2 bonus episodes a month, and we have all those episodes for you there. And seriously, it just helps with putting together the costs of the show. And we appreciate all of you that do that. We actually put out our second bonus episode, Sonia, on the 27th. Not on the last day of the month. We actually did it a few days and change.
Look who has their shit together this month.
Who's adulting now? What? All right, y'all. So, and wherever you get your podcast, if you could leave us a nice review if you like the show, that'd be amazing. Especially 5 stars in iTunes helps us battle
Find our people
with the 1 stars. But yeah, it helps us find our people. That's the most important thing. And we hope you enjoy today's show. Sonia, are you ready to hear about this?
Yeah,
Are
I'm
you
ready.
to rock?
I'm ready to rock.
Let me just read this and then I'll talk about our sources. And once again, our sources are very important. We do pay for, our news and shit like that. In the 1970s and 1980s, entertainment designed to reach teenagers and cure them of society ills fell to YA writers, TV movies, and after-school specials. And one of the most compelling stories was the subject of 1971's Go Ask Alice, based supposedly on the true story of a teen girl who delved into drugs and ultimately lost her life. It was designed to scare the audience, and the 1973 film cemented its importance as a tool for communicating between generations. That used to be a whole thing, the generation gap, and how do we blah, blah, blah. Beatrice Sparks billed herself as an adolescent psychology expert with an uncanny ability to write stories based on true life journals and in-person interview sessions. She claimed she'd done thousands of them. She lived well into her 90s. I still call bullshit. That's a lot of interviews. But anyway.
Yes.
How true were her supposed nonfiction works? And this stuff, by the way, if you look up her books, they're under all kinds of crazy categories. The trigger warnings for this particular episode are addiction and a discussion of suicide, but we don't go into the deep details.
Okay.
We just try to be as careful as we can, that kind of thing. All right. So my sources, Quillet, Beatrice Sparks' Wikipedia page. We love Wikipedia.
Yes.
Esquire Magazine, Jezebel, Rolling Stone, New York Times, Salt Lake City Weekly, Houston Public Radio, Salt Lake City Tribune, Sydney Morning Herald. Hello, mates. Sorry, Below Deck Down Under is back. I got Captain Jason on my mind. I always have Captain Jason on my mind. All right. The book that I really loved, I want to thank Thaddeus for shouting out this book in the group. This is what got me interested in it. Rick Emerson's Unmask Alice, LSD, Satanic Panic, and the imposter behind the world's most notorious diaries. There's he goes all in with this book, and I'll tell you about it when we get to him. The New Yorker, Slate, Vanity Fair. All righty. Let me bring up my notes, and we'll start with, I'm going to get a little personal, but not too much. But, well, first I want to ask you.
Yes.
Did you ever read Go Ask Alice? Did you know about it?
The name is familiar, but no, I have not read it.
Okay. But did you listen to the bit with Paul F. Tompkins, Wharf Rat?
Yes.
Okay. So that's what also got me, because I hadn't thought about it in years. This was one of those books that I was young when this book came out, obviously. I was in the second or third generation of waves of teenagers.
We're not that old, everybody.
No, and there's nothing wrong with being that old, by the way. This book sold millions and millions of copies. It came out the same year as The Bell Jar and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It's like this new wave of YA books. Okay. So in my life and in my family, we, and this happens in a lot of families, there's one kid that sometimes just seems to get in trouble no matter what. They're just kind of a fuck up. And that was my brother, John. R.I.P. And I know how it's like to be in that environment, because one person in your family having a problem, everybody can have a problem.
It becomes everybody's problem.
It
correct?
really does. And it's just like, how do you manage it? How do you talk about it? We grew up on different coasts. So I grew up on the East Coast in a very Irish Catholic family. And it wasn't like the place where we all talked about our feelings and had a lot of patience for one another. It wasn't like that. It was sort of like, oh, come on. Not so bad. Rub some dirt in it. Just,
rub some dirt on it. Walk it off.
Walk it off. You're fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
And I understand. So for me, and I didn't realize this till years later, but pop culture helped me with my anxiety, helped me with my problem solving. If I read a book about someone who was going through something I was going through, it helped me. right?
Yeah.
And it didn't have to.
It's still.
Right.
Still. Yeah.
It still does, right? And even if
Yeah.
it's not directly associated with what I was going through, just I still that I could find some empathy, some sympathy, and I found it very useful and helpful.
Yeah.
So I was always looking.
You're not alone.
I'm not. So I was always
Yeah.
looking for books and movies. They didn't have podcasts then, but films, anything, music, anything that could. Anyway, and my parents tried their best with him. Not really, but that's for another day. But I developed a fear of honestly becoming a teenager when I was young. And
Interesting.
I was so scared of, because, you think, I didn't think of things like I'll be able to drive and I'll have a boyfriend and I can wear, high heels and get my ears pierced, like all those things, which are fun things. But I was more like, what if I get into drugs? What if I get into a cult? What if somebody offers me a joint and then it's laced with something and I, jump through a window? What if like that church group is really they're a bunch of Satanists? Honestly, like because the 70s and 80s were fucked up and bizarre. It's a bizarre place to grow up.
Yeah, y'all, we had like constant commercials on TV too that were like, this is your brain on drugs, like
Right.
a fried egg, and it was, or these commercials for like the Church of Latter-day Saints where it was just all about like lying and just say no and all this. It made it sound like you were walking into like a post-apocalyptic world when you went into high school
Yes.
or things like that. It was absolutely terrifying. Like you would think it was going to be like the Warriors when you got there.
I really did.
It's scary.
I had a very scared idea. And the thing is that we moved every few years. So the high school I probably would have wound up if we hadn't moved was kind of scary. So maybe that was something that was planted in my head. Any Hoosers. I remember that there was this book, Go Ask Alice, and the older teens would talk about it and they would be like, oh my God, it's so scary because it's about a real girl. And she's 15 and she uses drugs and she dies. Like, oh my God. So, next thing I wanted to ask you, like, how did you learn about marijuana and LSD? What kind of drug education did you have?
I most definitely learned it from movies. Like seeing it in movie. I mean, I think the first thing I saw about marijuana, honestly, was probably Cheech and Chong.
Oh, yes.
Like
Dave's not here.
Dave's not here, man. Like it was probably stuff like that. And, but I was also like, I, even though it was a comedy, that kind of stuff still scared me because to me, it seemed like, oh, you do this thing and you lose control.
Right.
And here you go, a little insight into Sonia now. I'm still kind of like this.
Okay. You said that. That's something like my brother and I, John and I, we went to see you too at and I was driving us home and we were talking about drugs. And I said, I just don't like to feel out of control. And he went,
Yes.
Really? And then he went, oh, really? He
Yeah.
quickly what are you talking about? Because he didn't fear that at all. Like that wasn't scary to him.
To me, like I like to, have wine or beer or whatever. Like I
Right.
like to drink, but I feel like I can control the intake and I know, how to behave, I guess. Like I don't feel like I could control the intake of things like marijuana or acid. Like it's going to be strong no matter what, which isn't even necessarily the case, but that is how my mind worked back in the day. So I was never comfortable with that sort of thing. But if other people wanted to do it, I was like, you do you.
Right.
Like, good luck with that.
I feel like our generation also, it was like, don't do drugs, don't just say no.
Yes.
And I was told that it would change your DNA if you did LSD. Like if you did enough of it, you could never come back. You would go so psychotic. You would never come
I
back.
definitely heard that. Like it could fuck up your brain. It really will.
Forever.
Yeah,
Right.
forever. You won't come back.
You
Like,
will have
you'll just be-
flashbacks forever.
Yes.
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 It's a lot of fear-based stuff. So we're going to talk about drugs here today. Obviously, we're not pro doing anything, but it's just funny now because in our lifetimes, marijuana went from being something like, oh my God, that guy's got weed, to,
Yeah.
oh, they sell it on every corner in my
Oh my
nice neighborhood.
Yes.
Like people walk in
Yes.
with their baby carriages. Like, I need some gummies to sleep,
Yes.
please. Yes.
Yes, I went from my sister hanging out of our bedroom window smoking pot to now my sister and I and my mother walk into a dispensary together.
Yeah. My mom too. Yes. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to just talk a bit about Mormonism, because Mormonism is a big factor in this story in Beatrice Sparks' life and her people she talks about. I just want to make it clear, most of what I know about Mormonism I learned from Heather Gay on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. So I ran the chat GPT to try to be as correct as I can on a couple of things, but if I don't get them completely right, just understand. So let me
Thanks, robots.
Thanks, robots. That'll take over my whole life one day. Well, first we're going to talk about reefer, pot, weed, whatever the kids call it these days.
The grass.
The grass. It came to America early 20th century. A lot of people say Mexicans brought with them. Okay. I don't doubt anything that, and not in a bad way. I just mean pot was sort of becoming more recreational during
The Roaring 20s.
the Roaring Prohibition. Sorry.
Yes.
It started during Prohibition because you couldn't get alcohol. So people started smoking weed, and then alcohol came back, and then people were like, well, I still like that weed shit, so I'm going to keep that around. 1938, there's a movie called Reefer Madness, and that was created.
I've seen that.
Yeah, everyone's seen that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was created to kind of scare people off of, the government was like, we got to control this stuff. It makes people way too happy.
We don't want people that happy.
Also, LSD, which stands for, I can't say it, but the trade name is Delyside, Delyside, and it was created for psychiatric use in 1947, and it was done to treat trauma patients, or trauma, as Jamie Lee Curtis would say. Trauma. It's family trauma. It's all about trauma. I'm getting good at that. Anyway. The United States thought it was created in the USA, and it was thought that maybe we could help people with this, and or we could use it as a weapon, because if you use enough of this stuff, you kind of go kooky. In the baby boom years, we have in the 60s, Timothy Leary and his Merry Pranksters. This is the shit that makes me crazy. People would spike drinks, with this stuff. Like, I don't like that either. I've done acid twice, and that's 2 more times than I should have. It's not my thing.
It's terrifying. You think you're just drinking something non-alcoholic,
Right.
even, and the next thing you know, start tripping.
Oh,
you're going to think your brain is broken.
And who are you around when that happens? That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Hunter S. Thompson writing, The Beatles, acid rock, Grateful Dead. There's also culture wars, Vietnam War. There's long hair hippies versus the straights. Teen runaways are becoming a problem. They're taking off for cities. Cities are actually raising the age for alcohol, so then the kids are going for something else because kids like to get high. Manson, RFK, Martin Luther King, all these things are happening throughout the 60s. They're not considered first-class drugs, though, until Nixon is in office. Nixon.
He's on the list.
He's definitely on the list, and I was just thinking of that, and also Kissinger. It's like they're going to have to be multiple episodes because there's so much to go over here.
Yeah, we'd have to break it up by subject matter.
We would, like the Kennedy era and all that stuff.
Yeah.
He wanted it, though. That was when he was elected in 68. That was a big thing. He wanted to get rid of that marijuana and all those
that'll
dope
control the
smoking
hippies.
Yes. There's a whole thing about hippies versus straights, and the hippies were not the majority of people, so they had some shit to put up with. Anyway, let's talk about Beatrice, Ruby Matthews Sparks. She was a Mormon Ute. She was, as she's listed on her Wikipedia page, counselor, author, and serial hoaxer. Known
Serial
hoaxer. She wrote about books, and her whole 2 things she wanted in her life. She wanted to be famous for being a writer, and then she also wanted to be a children's therapist. These are like 2 very different, divergent fields. But
Depends what you're writing about,
But
I
it
guess.
depends what you're writing about. So she was married She lived in the Bay Area for a little while. And then when she was around 17, she met this older man. He was a Mormon. They moved to his home in Texas. They were oil speculators. They made a shitload of money. And they go back and they move to Southern California. And he's just like enjoying the money. And she's like, they're having kids. They're nice little Mormons. And she says, I want to be a writer. He goes, well, then write. So she was constantly pitching ideas to people. And because they're Mormon, they tended to be more of they were friends with Pat Boone. And they were friends with Art Linkletter, who we'll talk about in a second. But she would pitch like family wholesome ideas and ways to help teenagers on the straight and narrow. The Mormons became, starting in the late 1800s, as this wild religion. Like, oh my God, these people see things and they have multiple wives. And what's up with these people? Who are these people?
Who are these people?
Right. And then they gradually, everything became about being a straight American. So they got rid of the polyamorous, poly relationships.
It's in a certain segment, I should say.
They're the ones
a thing.
that... Yeah, that is definitely a thing. I think we've talked about them in the past, and we'll talk about them in the future because it's a real problem. But the majority of Mormons don't do that. And it's very family-oriented. It's very conservative. It's very, people give 10% of their income. People are expected, they have family nights, like they hang out with their families. When you join the priesthood, which is what women get.
Gross.
No shit.
Hanging out with your family.
They have church on Sundays is like a whole day event. You know, there's lots of instruction. There's but there's also, you're supposed to do good deeds for your community. And so a lot of people, she thought like, maybe I could help people in other parts of the country. They learn these Mormon values from me and they'll be righteous people, whatever. So somehow she comes across and she claims that she had degrees at BYU and also UCLA. She doesn't have anything from these places. Like they can't find anything. But when she and her husband moved to Provo, Utah, when her oldest started going to college there, she was working for these she was working for some mental health hospitals, which were not all that great shape in the late 60s. That's
correct.
Yeah. And she's also doing a lot of like Mormon youth missions. Like they have these Mormon camps and like for a week you stay at the university. You're like a high school student. And so she would counsel them. And she counted all these kids as patients. So if there was like 100 kids that came, she said I had 100 patients. That's probably why she gets the thousands numbers. Okay. But she based on her experience talking to teens, she claims that someone in the some family gave her a diary, and they gave her this diary and said, this is about our 15-year-old daughter who died. And she kept a diary, and she was in drugs, and she became a sex worker, and she ran away from home, and she's been through shit and back. She was whatever. And then she thought she turned her life around, and then she got into drugs again. We need to help kids. Drugs is a big thing. Everyone's talking about weed and LSD. What do you have to say? And she's like, I will write a book about this. So she goes to Art Linkletter. Who's Art Linkletter?
I don't know.
Canadian-born American.
I do know the name.
The name is familiar. He was huge in like the 50s and 60s. He was born in Moose Jaw, Canada. I always laugh when I see that. And he was a TV host. He was married for almost 75 years to his spouse. And he had a thing called Kids Say the Darndest Things. And
oh, yes. Right.
And he was
okay. Thank you.
And he had a show called People Are Funny. And it was all very clean family entertainment. And it's like kids are making like, dick jokes, but they don't realize they're doing that. Or it's maybe. And that's right. He was married from 1935 to 2010.
Okay.
She knows him, and she's always pitching him ideas. And so she showed him, she goes, I got this idea for a book, but I can't. She try to think, but nothing happens. She tries to do these things, and she can't make it work. She's 52 at this point. And he says, I know a publisher. I'll write the copy on your book. I'll give it a blurb, and they'll put this through. So she finally gets this book deal and it's from Prentice Hall. And she finally gets this book. Oh, one of the things she did, Provo, by the way, is known for being the Ponzi scheme capital, not my terminology. But there are a lot of MLMs that start.
Yes. Okay.
She worked on one called the Family Achievement Institute. And what she would do was write scripts for people like Pat Boone and Art Linkletter, and it was all about, isn't America awesome and great, and how can you love America more? They would record
America,
these. Fuck yeah. I wish. Pat Boone singing that would be amazing. But
it would be.
They would record several albums, and then they would say, just sell these albums, and you'll make like $16,000 a month. Like, who's going to buy an album of... No. So anyway, so the war on drugs, Prentice Hall Communications, they published her book, and that's in 1971. But they tell her, this book is awesome. We love this diary. Somebody at Communications heard the White Rabbit song by Jefferson Airplane, and so they came up with Go Ask Alice, which is a brilliant idea, I think. And they said, all right, but here's the deal. We're going to say it's by anonymous because we're not going to put the name of this person out. So we think it's better marketing. Because let's be clear, the writing in this thing is not great.
Right.
She doesn't like that, but she doesn't really have a choice. Like, this is her big shot to get something published. So she's, like I said, 52. She's like, fine. It sells like crazy right away. And gets great reviews around the country. And even though they talk about blowjobs and they talk about smoking pot and all this stuff that people say you can't have in a book and kids can't read it because it's terrible, it's all in this book from like 50 years ago. And schools gave kids to read this book.
Yeah.
Well, so this book takes off, and it does so well. There's a TV movie, and you can still watch it. I think it's a streaming. It's William Shatner plays the dad. Andy Griffith plays a priest.
I'm looking it up because I may have seen this. Anyway, go ahead.
It's about this girl. It's like a 20-year-old playing a 15-year-old or whatever, but Alice is going through the ringer, man. Like, in the book, Alice goes to a mental hospital and she escapes, and in the book, like, she did all this stuff. In the movie, they kind of cut some things out, but in the movie, there's this one crazy scene. Alice runs away with one of her friends, and they get caught in this house, and it's a weird old guy and a weird old lady, and these girls are on their like hands and knees, like, and it's crazy. It's the movies, by the way. TV movies used to be 90 minutes. Like, it was actually like 73 minutes altogether.
Here's the other thing I think TV movies used to be fucked up. Like,
yeah,
Salem's Lot was a TV movie. It was like a mini series. It's messed up. Or The Day After.
Yes.
That scarred people for my sister still has nightmares about The Day After. TV movies used to be absolutely terrifying.
And it was a way to like talk about subjects that are tough to talk about. So you just fictionalize them. There's like Dawn, Portrait of a Teenage Runaway. There was Alexander, who was the male version of that. They had ones for drinking. They had ones for people getting pregnant. I mean, there were always these movies. So this is one of the first, and it did really, really well. And every time it was on the air, it would get high ratings. So it helped her even more. She did publish other books, and everything that she publishes is based on supposed diaries. One is called, in 1978, it's called Voices. And it has 4 teenagers. And I'm getting this from the New Yorker. Mark confesses his suicidal thoughts. Jane reveals what it's like to be a runaway dragged into sex and drugs. Millie describes how a teacher took advantage of her and introduced her to lesbianism. And Mary tells the story of being brainwashed into a cult and then deprogrammed. That was another thing, deprogramming people. She claimed all these things were true. And all these books are selling.
Yes.
So somewhere around 73, when the TV movie comes out, she meets a woman in Pleasant Grove, Utah, which is near Provo, I guess. All the Utahns are now going to like, fuck you. You don't even know where that is.
You don't even know. We don't.
I really don't. Marcella is the woman. She comes to her and says, my son died by suicide, and we always had a lot of problems with him. And he was keeping a journal, and I read somewhere that you had a book about a girl with her journal, and maybe my son's journal would help people. Her husband didn't want her to do this. The other kids in the family didn't want her to do this, but it'd been a couple of years and she just couldn't, she's managing an unbearable kind of grief, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that.
Yeah.
And she talks about the fact that he was supposedly had a genius IQ but he had a lot of problems. And just in order to understand Mormon faith, there are several heavens. And that's, if you don't do things properly, you'll be in a different heaven than the rest of your family. Okay, so there's celestial kingdom, and this is from ChatGPT. It's the highest and most desirable degree of heaven. It's where God and Jesus Christ are, so you won't find me there. Marriage and family relationships are set to continue in the celestial kingdom. Got it?
Okay. I also won't be there.
Oh, no. Terrestrial kingdom is middle. There's like 3 different degrees. And it's
Okay.
people who live full lives but haven't fully accepted the gospel. Maybe that's where we would be. And the telestial is the lowest degree of heaven. There's no hell here. It's for individuals who did not accept the gospel of Jesus Christ or lived teachings to the contrary. Outer darkness is not considered a traditional heaven, but rather a state of punishment for the most wicked individuals. So that's the outer darkness.
Okay.
Also, this time that she goes to see her is the same year that The Exorcist is released. So people are talking about the devil and how it could, okay. Alden Barrett, his parents are Marcella and Doyle. She was married once. She had 3 kids, and then her husband died in a car accident. She marries Doyle while she's going to school to get her degree at BYU, and they have 3 kids together. So it's 6. They're devout Mormons. But the Doyle guy, he went to school and he understands about mental health and he's always trying to educate people about this is the irony, is like he really understood. Okay.
Right.
So he had 3 older siblings and 2 younger siblings. And by the time he entered high school, and he had been a tough kid, he had bouts of anger. He's very hard to discipline. He started to grow his hair out. And by growing it out, I mean probably 2 inches shorter than your hair, and your hair is like shoulder length right now.
Yeah.
And
Hippie.
And for Utah at the time, if you didn't have a buzz cut, you were being a filthy hippie. And so his parents said, cut your hair, cut your hair, cut your hair. And the more they said it, the more determined he became not to cut his hair.
Which is what teenagers do.
Which is what they do. Yeah. And how you handle that is, it shows who you are as an adult. How do you manage that kind of stress? How do you manage that kind of defiance? What are you going to fight over? That's my thing. Am I really going to fight over this? I wouldn't over hair because I don't give a shit. But for some people, it's all about appearances. People will make fun of us. They'll make assumptions.
Yes.
So his older siblings decided to take things into their hands. And one day in the backyard, they dragged him out, pinned him to the ground, took garden shears, and started cutting out his hair.
Oh my gosh, that's going to mess you up.
It wound up piercing his scalp.
Oh.
So they take him to the hospital. He's okay. But when they take him to the barber to fix it, the only thing they can do is shave his head.
Oh, man.
So this kid had one thing he liked about himself, which was his hair. He really liked his hair. Aww. Don't touch my hair. Like in Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah.
And his parents just took it all away from him in a flash. Just because he didn't want to get a fucking haircut.
Yeah. And teenagers' hair, to quote Fleabag, hair is everything. Like,
it is.
Hair is a big deal when you're a young person. I mean, it's a big deal for a lot of a big deal for a lot of people. I don't want to say everyone, but it is a big deal for a lot of people. Like, and it's a way you express yourself. It's how you show your style. It's part of your identity. So for someone to like pin you down and chop off your hair is to try to strip away who you are. It's a big deal.
It was a big deal. And he was trying to question, he was always questioning the Mormon faith, which they really didn't like. He would say things like, how do you know it's real? What if it's all made up? Why don't they let black men become priests? Not until 1978, by the way.
Legit thoughts. Like,
right, but he was not allowed to question. He hated Nixon. He didn't like the Republican Party. These are not popular stances in Utah now versus then even.
Yes.
Okay. One day, it got so bad in his family that his parents decided that they were going to teach him a lesson. And they took away all of his things out of his room. They took all of his clothes away. He just was in his underwear. They put him in his room.
God.
They chained the door, locked the door, and they left him with a notebook. And he had to write down his sins and his personality flaws.
Oh my God.
He had to ask permission to go to the bathroom. They would bring water and food like very quickly. And after 3 days, he finally broke down and wrote, I mean,
Jesus Christ.
yeah.
That is not parenting.
No.
That is
And
fucking torture.
that is, you would not get away with that nowadays. I mean, that would,
No.
and so that's some shit he had to deal with. But he had those consequences, and he still kept using drugs. And he stole pills from his parents. He gave drugs to friends. He would just steal anything out of medicine. His doctor was a doctor. He could find pills, and he would just give people pills, and they didn't know what they were. So he was a problem. I don't think this is anything near a solution, but talking to people, they just get frustrated and they don't know what else to do.
Right.
He wound up at a Utah work camp, and he liked it. He went straight. They're mostly outlawed now,
Yes.
but by the time he kind of got his groove back, he was ready to go to high school. He was in junior year in high school, and he started the debate club. He joined the debate club, and he loved it. And he was so good at it, he became the president of the debate club. So he had this this one thing he was really, really good at, because he loved to argue. He was good at it. And then he met a girl, and they were really super in love, like you are when you're that young.
Yeah.
It's the whole world. The only thing is that he had been on probation for some serious shit, and her parents were like, no, you can't date him. So they dated for a few months, and they actually got married, and it's more like they were out in the moonlight holding hands and gave each other rings. But her parents were like, no. And she was older than him, by the way. She was a senior. She was going to go away to college.
Okay.
So they said, look, you're going to go to college anyway. You're going to break up with him anyway. So you might as well just break up with him. So she breaks up with him. She says, I love you, but my parents won't let me see you. And they told me I have to date other boys. So he's not only she breaks up with him, but she goes out with other guys. Now, nobody owns anybody and all that.
Correct.
But that's tough to take when you're a teenager. And
It's tough to take
now,
as an adult.
also, like the day he gets dumped, he comes home and his parents tell him that his cat that he completely loved and grew up with just died, and they had to put her to sleep.
Come on.
So he was like,
no, this is awful. Like everything that he's having the worst day ever.
He was literally having the worst day ever. So I'll be really quick. One day he just couldn't take it anymore. Like I said, the drugs, the sadness, the depression, and he died by suicide. And his younger brother found him, which sad, yeah. And in the end, like the family, it really tore up the family. The father, Marcella, lost her first husband to a car accident. Her second husband, Doyle, he left her for another woman. And her
Not nice. Not nice.
And her son Scott would grow up to leave the church, and he eventually moved away.
Okay.
So by the time Marcella is meeting Beatrice, she's been through the shit.
Right.
She's like, oh my God, I've been through everything. Can you help me? And so Beatrice says, yes, I will help you. Let me take that diary off your hands. So she takes the diary away. And several years later, a book called Jay's Journal comes out.
Jay's?
J-A-Y.
Okay.
So J-A,
Gotcha.
plural, or Jay's possessive, excuse me.
Yes.
They use very few of his actual words, very few. She added witchcraft and Satanism to his story.
Oh my, yeah, it needed that. It needed that, everybody.
She wrote about bloody ceremonies. She wrote about a girl named Debbie who took him down this dark path. She said that they abused animals during their satanic ritual. She lists it. She claimed his closest friends were also in this coven, and they died soon after he died. And they died like car accidents and things like that. Like nothing, right. But she blamed it all on her. And she said that Jay liked Ouija boards, and that's what got him into Satanism. Ouija boards, by the way, in the 70s, I think they're still on sale at Mattel. It's sold by Mattel.
Yeah,
Like, they're toys.
You could go to Target and buy
Yes.
a Ouija board. Like, it's a thing. You could just buy it anywhere.
Can I read you a couple of pages?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So this is from Jay's journal. I'll just be really quick, but this is just like what it is, like what people
Yes.
take in. Okay. All right. Being grounded is really the shits. I've been in prison for a week, and I've read and studied and drawn until about to go stir crazy. All because I punched Kendall out for getting in my room and messing up my stuff. I just threw him out in the hall after I'd already told him 100 million times to bug off. How in the hell was I supposed to know he'd land the wrong way and break his arm? And then here's Debbie. Oh, Debbie, Debbie, Debbie. You make me feel like a real person. Someone important and worthwhile. Sometimes I'm embarrassed because you're such a dumbass little blonde with not so good grammar, but what you do for my ego is something else. It's so stupid.
It's so stupid. And his story is pretty traumatic as is. Like, you didn't need
Absolutely.
to add all of this other stuff. It's very extreme.
So word gets out, and it's Pleasant Grove where he's from. She changes the names for everything, but it does not take long for kids to figure out, oh, do you know who that
Right.
really is? Because she lived in
Yes.
that town too. Beatrice Sparks,
Right.
who has her name on the novel. So all these kids start telling these stories. It takes about a generation of teenager, like, a few years, but they start saying, oh, well, you know who that is? That was really Alden. And he spooks the hallways, and he killed this friend's dog, and he did that, and then people started vandalizing his grave, his
Oh, man.
gravestone. They had to take it away for a decade because people would just ransack the graveyard where they were. The family had to move away. The parents split up. Like I said, like everything was just decimated because this person lied about him.
Also,
For content.
Just say it's fiction or inspired by.
She would
or
never do that. She's an asshole. She doubled down when people were saying things like, how can that be true? And what are you talking about? Let me tell you some of her other books. She had Jay's Journal. It Happened to Nancy by an Anonymous Teenager. Almost Lost, a story of an anonymous teenager's life on the streets. Annie's Baby, a pregnant teenager. Treacherous Love, another anonymous teenager. Kim, Empty Inside, another anonymous teenager. Finding Katie, Lucy in the Sky. This is up to 2012.
Oh my
She was
gosh.
doing this shit. That was her jam. She pretended that
Wow.
she somehow got all these journals. There's one of them where it's a teenager who not only gets AIDS from having sex with some guy but she also became pregnant and she and the baby die. It's
Oh my
just,
gosh.
I mean, so like I was saying, the satanic panic happens in the 80s and it becomes this story that everyone starts believing. Like the kids start, everyone does. There's a McMartin preschool thing that happened.
Yes.
Heavy metal music. If you play Judas Priest backwards, you'll blow your head off. Like that's what
Yes.
they're telling you to do it. What is the point of doing anything and playing it backwards? Who's ever played a record backwards? Like you can't hear a fucking thing. It's all made up.
No.
There's also the drug panic of the 80s, 70s, and 80s,
Yes.
and the Reagan administration doesn't help. But,
No.
by the way, Art Linkletter, towards the after a while in the 70s, he realized, pot isn't such a big deal. And why are we arresting people for? That's what his thing. He didn't understand the criminalization of it. He just wanted to help people. He didn't want to. But anyway, we had Just Say No. That was a whole Reagan era thing. Crime McGruff or whatever, that dog that also.
Yeah.
McGruff. After school
crime dog.
specials, there's the one where Helen
yes.
Hunt is jumping through the window because she's on speed. I mean, Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Oh my God, the drunk driving stuff of
Rad.
the 80s.
Rockers Against Drugs with Vince
Yes,
Neil of
and there was,
Motley
like-
Crue.
Yeah, and then all of them arrested for drunk driving at some point.
Oh, yeah.
There was like the SAD. It was like Students Against Drunk Driving.
Yep.
By the way, they had me so scared. I remember like going somewhere and my dad like had a beer, and then like 2 hours later we were going to leave and I was terrified that
It's a good thing to be scared of,
yeah.
I think, but yeah.
But now I look back and I was like, oh my gosh, he had a beer, and then like 2 to 3 hours later, I
yeah.
was like, I don't know. By the way, that beer was like Coors or Budweiser. It wasn't even like,
Was it Bud
you know,
Light?
but also, my dad would never drink Bud Light now. How dare you? But like, I was so afraid of that sort of thing. Like, I mean, I'm still, by the way, I'm
Yeah,
still
well, you
afraid
know, and some of them are
but-
helpful, but like I have people
Yeah.
younger than me that say the Punky Brewster had an episode where a kid got locked in a refrigerator and almost died. There's Arnold on not What's Happening, Different Strokes. Remember
Different
when Arnold
Strokes, yes.
with the Mr. Carlson was gonna like molest him. I mean, they were all
Yes.
Remember that?
That's right. Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Carlson from WKRP in Cincinnati. Guys, these are I'm jumping all over the place here. I'm old.
Yes.
These are all bouncing in my head. But they were constantly trying to scare us with these stories.
Yes.
And what did we learn from all that? Well, first of all, Sparks died, and she took it to her grave. And her family's very defensive about people saying that she wasn't really a doctor. She also, by the way, I didn't tell you, insisted on being listed as Dr. Beatrice Sparks, even though she doesn't have any doctorate in anything anywhere.
Did she keep a journal, and can we write a book based on it?
We should, actually.
Let's just do it.
1975. Who am I going to fucking lie about this year?
Yes.
In time for the bicentennial.
You can do it.
Anyway, my point is, in this book, by the way, which is a great book, Unmask Alice, I recommend it, but he's very snarky. He makes a lot of asides. At one point in 1991, Beatrice Sparks was invited to a literary conference in New York, and Toni Morrison was one of the special guests, and he shits on Toni Morrison in there. Like, that hack. Like, there's a lot going on here. Anyway.
Yes.
Here we are all these years later, and you just check Twitter, Threads, wherever. People still use anecdotes as evidence. They still
Yes.
claim that they heard a story from a guy, and now I
That
won't
knows
get a
a guy.
vaccination. Right.
Yes.
I heard somebody got a flu shot, and they dropped dead in the waiting room on the way home, or whatever. I mean, unfortunately, we haven't learned the lesson that we're supposed to learn, but hopefully we are a bit stricter about what we label as fiction and nonfiction.
Maybe.
I'm leaving you on that hopeful note.
Yes.
And that's our creep this week, Sonia. Beatrice
Good.
Sparks.
Good job, my friend.
Thank you.
I learned so much from this.
It's wacky, right?
It is wacky. Do you want to hear about someone who's not a creep?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I got this one from you and our What a Creep group. She was posted in the What a Creep group as well. We're going to talk about Abigail Disney. Does her last name sound familiar to you?
Never heard of it. No. Who dis?
Who dis? Abigail Disney is the daughter of Patricia Ann and Roy E. Disney. She's the granddaughter of Roy O. Disney, who co-founded Walt Disney Company with some dude named Walt Disney.
Walt Disney.
Yes. But she is, Abigail is also, she's a documentary film producer and a social activist. Some of her documentaries, she did the 2008 documentary called Pray the Devil Back to Hell. And it's about a peace movement in Liberia. Sorry.
Liberia?
Liberia. Thank you. Thank you. She did another one called Armor of Light, and it's about like a priest and a mother of a shooting victim that like kind of form an alliance to talk about gun violence in America. There's another one called The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales. And this is about, you know, rich people, which she knows a lot about how unequal the economy is and why the American dream seems to work for the wealthy, but is kind of a nightmare for people who are born with less. She's done a lot of really good stuff. Her and her husband created something called the Daphne Foundation in 91, and it funds programs that take on poverty or trying to fight poverty throughout New York City.
Oh, wow. At Daphne?
Daphne.
That's my friend's daughter's name.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful name.
It is.
She also started another nonprofit organization called Peace is Loud, and it uses media and live events to spotlight like women leaders who are trying to get peace in this fucking crazy world. She is part of a group called the Patriotic Millionaires, and this is actually, whenever I hear the word patriotic, I'm like, ugh. But it's not that, everybody. It's not that. It's a group of people who have a shit ton of money like her that actually support more taxes on the rich. We need more of that, please.
Yes.
She is someone who has been standing up. She's been very vocal in supporting Disneyland employees who are underpaid and about the working conditions at Disneyland. She went and met with like employees, and she found out that some of them like actually like go through the garbage there to get food because they are not paid enough. You know, she has also like went after Disney. Again, this is her last name is Disney. Like this is very much like a, hey, don't bite the hand that feeds you. But she's like, fuck that. She went after Disney after they like laid off like all their like lowest paid employees during the pandemic. In 2020, she did a TED Talk where she just went after Disney for like the low pay rates for employees at all the Disney theme parks. She said that like back in the day, a custodian who worked at if say you were a custodian at Disney, you actually made enough money to feed your family. You could like afford a home. You had healthcare benefits. And she says now 3 out of 4 of the people who smile when you walk in, who help you comfort that crying baby, who help you have the best vacation you ever had, can't put food on the table. She says that Disney turns a huge profit, like, and that they don't pay it forward.
No, they don't.
Like, the people, she said, it turns your stomach a little bit when I tell you that Cinderella might be sleeping in her car.
Wow.
Like, it's pretty bananas. She has also been speaking out about Ron DeSantis's shitty, like, anti-gay bills and anti-trans bills in Florida, where Disney World is. And just this summer, this is when she really started, like, people were sharing this in the What a Creep group. So earlier this summer, she got arrested at a climate change protest in the Hamptons.
Nice.
Yes, very nice. And she said, as a person who has been privileged enough to use private jets, I know how hard it's to give up a special luxury. But I also know the time has passed for spewing greenhouse gases like this merely for our personal comfort. She's 63 years old, and she said, at 63, I still had not popped my fingerprint mugshot cherry, so I did this. Said the last thing this planet needs is billionaires spewing greenhouse gases to go to their beach homes. It's just so wrong.
She's right.
She's right. And then recently, there's a huge strike going on. We talked about it in last week's What a Creep. And she went after Bob Iger, who makes so much fucking money. He makes like hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And, Rolling Stone just flatly asked her, like, is he the right person to lead this company? And she's like, she's like, if I say no to that question, it'll haunt me on Google for the rest of my life.
Right.
But, she's said that it's a different climate now and we should be thinking differently about how we run corporations. And I thought this was very interesting. She said, I really think it's time for businesses to reimagine what the point of a corporation is, why a corporation exists. We need to question this notion that capital only belongs to owners when we can't achieve anything without workers.
Exactly.
I think that is so interesting. And, Iger, like 1 year, he made this is 2018, he made $65 million. And that's like almost 1,500 times the median salary of a Disney employee. And I don't know if y'all have been to Disneyland or Disney World or any of those things. It's not an easy job. Like,
it's a long goddamn day, for sure.
It's a long day. You're on your feet. If you're in LA or Florida, it's probably fucking hot. You're wearing those costumes.
Yeah.
You can't, it's hard work, and she rightfully points out, like, CEOs should be like the captain of the ship, and if you have $65 million in your pocket and the people in your company can't even like buy food, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
You're not a good ship captain. So I really thank you, What a Creep Group, and Margot for pointing me in the direction of her. She is really rad. Like, that is our not creep. Abigail Disney.
Yeah, Robert Iger gave us all these men are trying to give him and Barry Diller are trying to give talking points. Like, they're at their billionaire camp up in Montana or wherever the hell that was.
Fuck these people.
And they're in the Ralph Lauren clothes, and he's just like, oh, you're all being unrealistic. Like, no, that the whole business model is unrealistic. It's just,
yes,
it's ridiculous.
Also the idea that we could use like ChatGPT or AI or something to replace like storytellers' jobs. And I can't help but think we could use ChatGPT or AI to replace Bob Iger.
We could.
Like, I'm like, the CEO, but he gets paid all this money to just like say yes and no to things.
Right.
I'm like, meh, we get a magic fucking 8-ball for that. That's fine. All signs point to yes. We have greenlit the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Seriously, fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy. Did you read this week Brian Robbins? Do you know who that is? He was in Head of the Class.
Yes.
He was like the meathead, not a stoner, but he was like the rocker guy.
Yeah.
He runs Paramount Pictures now.
It's so weird.
It's bizarre. He's had a bizarre career. And he isn't really like that much compared to the rest of them. I think he's only like $6 million. He's worth $100 million if he's anything. But anyway, he does this whole thing where they followed him for a few months, and this is before the strike happened.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying like, it's just not like it was. We're not making that much money. The cable networks are gone, and the business is all changed. We're not making. I'm like, are you fucking kidding? Like, he's already doing that in an interview. Like, just so you know, we're tapped dry. We don't have any more to give. And I'm like, fuck you.
You're so fucking rich. Fuck off.
Fuck off.
Like, they're making record profits, FYI. Listen to last week's episode.
Right.
They are fucking rolling in it. They don't get to plead poverty.
No, they do not.
Yeah. And Abigail Disney does not plead poverty. Like, she has a net worth of like $120 million or something. But she also donates like so much of that. She uses her name to like do good things. She puts her money where her mouth is.
Well, I say that's great. And I want to say that I know somebody, people always say that, people like to say that, what was his first name? Disney's first name? Walt. Jesus Christ. Sorry. I'm tired, you guys. I had so many Mormon things I had to learn this week. Some things had to pop up.
You're all good.
But people said Walt Disney was anti-Semitic, and my
Yeah.
friend's father worked for Walt Disney. He had like a Mad Men job. He worked for advertising for Disney in the early 60s and said he was great and he was amazing and great with people. And He would do meetings and do different voices of
Yeah.
different characters, and just was. He would be ashamed, just like a Bob Iger represents his brand. I'm sure he's rolling in his grave.
Well,
Unless he's Frozen. Is he the one that's Frozen?
Yeah. There's a couple of there's definitely like one of those like PBS documentaries about Walt Disney that I watched that is fascinating. And there's also The Imagineers, which is
Yes,
the one
I love
on
that
the
show.
Disney, which is so good. And it is about like the thought that he put into that park. And I don't think that he would love how expensive it is. He really seemed to want
It's
to
thousands
again,
of dollars, right? To go
yeah,
with your family?
Yeah, he's not a perfect person, by
No.
the way. Like he definitely isn't. But he did have like a really amazing mind. I mean, look at what he created, and he wanted this like this like fun thing for families. I don't know if he would want it to be this shitty, expensive thing where, I mean, it's really expensive.
No,
If you go with like, if you're talking like your like standard family, the idea of like 2 parents and 2 to 3 kids, that's $1,000. You're looking at probably $1,000.
and that's just for like the tickets.
Yeah, it's so much money. It's a lot.
It's a lot of money. Yeah. All right. Well, if you like the sound of our voices, and by golly, why wouldn't you? We also co-host a show called Dorking Out, where we dork out about movies. Not usually Disney movies, but sometimes. What did we dork out about last time?
We did Punchline.
Right. Punchline. We just did Punchline, which was Tom Hanks and Sally Field. And what are we doing this coming week?
We are talking about 1991's Mobsters with our good friend Adam Risky from F This Movie. We always have such a good time when Adam comes on, and this movie is going to be really fun to talk about.
I can't wait to talk about it. It's a Richard Grieco big star. The Greek.
It's also got Christian Slater in
and
it,
Patrick Dempsey.
But we keep talking about Booker from 21 Jump Street.
Booker had his own show, by the way. Remember that? Booker?
I know.
Hot in the City?
I know.
That's coming up
funny.
next. Please send us your suggestions for creeps and non-creeps. We just use all those social media I mentioned before. We love it. We use the Annie Potts gift. We got one from Ghostbusters, or just do your own thing.
Yeah.
And once again, the email, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. And please leave us reviews, nice reviews if you want. If you want to leave us a shitty review, just don't do that. Forget not to do that.
You don't need to do that. Just forget our names.
Just forget when we ever existed. Sonia, where can they find you?
You can find me on Threads and Facebook and Instagram and the TikTok, and it's all at thesoniashow.com. I'm on Twitter. I will never call it X, but I will be honest, I'm trying to spend less time there. So you probably should go to Threads.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, Margot?
I'm at Brooklyn Margot for Twitter, as long as that exists. I'm on Threads and Instagram, and my site is Brooklyn Fit Chick. And my TikTok is Margot Donahue, and I put clips there of the movies that we're talking about.
Yes, you do.
And sometimes my cats.
Oh, they're the cutest.
They are the cutest cats in Brooklyn. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay cool. Stay safe. Don't be a creep.
Be a creep. Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.